Have you ever wondered why kings and dukes in movies about the Middle Ages wear heavy fur cloaks even in their own bedrooms? We are used to seeing romantic images of castles with tall towers and lush gardens, but the reality was much harsher and colder. The stone walls, designed to protect against enemy armies, became traitors, sucking the last bit of warmth from their inhabitants and turning life into an endless struggle against the piercing cold. The only place where life really flourished, where you could feel like a human being and not an ice statue, was the kitchen. It was the heart of the castle, a huge breathing organism that never slept and consumed resources at an incredible rate. Watch the video to the end to find out how architectural mistakes of the past forced people to seek refuge among the servants and why the smell of smoke was the best perfume of that era. What if I told you that everything you believed when looking at beautiful pictures of knightly halls is not true? Imagine a lord waking up in his luxurious chambers where the water in the wash basin jug has turned into a monolithic piece of ice overnight. The tapestry-covered walls offered no protection from the deathly cold that penetrated the blankets and made even the most hardened warriors shiver. Every morning began not with a cheerful rise, but with a painful attempt to find at least some source of heat in the huge stone box. The fireplace in the bedroom, if there was one, gave only the illusion of warmth, heating the space within a radius of a meter while the back was covered with frost. The vast spaces of the castle halls were not just a status symbol, but a real climatic trap for their owners. High ceilings receding into darkness collected all the warm air, leaving the people below at the mercy of drafts. The absence of glass in the windows, which were closed only by wooden shutters, turned any room into a wind tunnel at the slightest breeze. Even thick curtains could not stop the icy currents of air that roamed the corridors like invisible ghosts. Living in such conditions required wearing multiple layers of woolen clothing around the clock, without even taking them off while sleeping. While the lords froze in their towers, a completely different life was boiling below. Inaccessible to the understanding of modern man, the servants who worked in the kitchen were in a privileged position, which they did not even suspect. Their workplace was the only island of the tropics in the middle of the Arctic desert of the stone castle. Here the fire never went out, creating a microclimate that allowed people to walk around in light shirts, while upstairs people wrapped themselves in furs. This contrast created a unique social dynamic where comfort did not always depend on title. The stone itself, from which the castles were built, had tremendous heat capacity, acting as a giant cold accumulator. In summer, it remained pleasantly cool, but in winter, it turned into an icy monolith that could not be warmed by any fireplaces. To heat walls 2 meters thick, it was necessary to burn fires for weeks, which no one could afford. People lived inside a giant refrigerator that was designed for defense, not for living. That is why the kitchen, with its constant fire, became the center of attraction for all the inhabitants. Every detail of the interior that we consider decorative actually had a purely utilitarian purpose: to preserve every bit of heat. The canopies over the beds were not designed for beauty, but to create a small enclosed space that could be warmed by breath. Carpets on the walls and floor served as insulators, trying to somehow shield people from the icy stone. Attempts to warm up with alcohol or hot wine had only a temporary effect, often leading to even greater hypothermia. The body, deceived by the dilation of blood vessels, quickly gave off precious heat to the environment. Therefore, the inhabitants of castles intuitively gravitated towards sources of radiant heat, the most powerful of which was the kitchen hearth. This was a place where physical survival was intertwined with the culinary arts. It was here, amid the soot and heat, that the real life of the castle took place. The myth that the nobility lived in comfort is shattered by the harsh reality of medieval winters. Comfort in those days was measured not by the softness of the bedding, but by the distance to the nearest open fire. The further you were from the kitchen, the lower your chances of spending the night without shivering. This turns our idea of the medieval hierarchy of comfort upside down. The real kings of warmth were the cooks and kitchen maids. It is interesting to observe how architecture dictated lifestyle, forcing people to migrate within their own homes. In winter, many lords left their spacious chambers and moved to small rooms closer to the kitchen chimney. Imagine this paradox. The owner of the castle, who had power over thousands of people, could not maintain a temperature above 10 degrees. Meanwhile, his servant, turning the spit, was drenched in sweat from the heat. This thermal injustice was an integral part of everyday life, rarely mentioned in history textbooks. We often forget that human physiological needs are the same regardless of status. How would you feel in such conditions, trading central heating for a fur cape and an icy floor? Do you agree that true comfort is more important than outward luxury? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes about real history. Now write in the comments, could you survive in a medieval castle in winter? Are you ready to learn the truth about why castles were designed to kill with cold? Medieval engineers were geniuses at fortification, but complete amateurs when it came to insulation and ventilation in living quarters. The architect's main task was to create an impregnable fortress capable of withstanding sieges and the blows of battering rams. Issues of comfort and heating were a distant 10th priority if they were even taken into account at all during the design process. The result was buildings that were perfectly protected from arrows but completely defenseless against the cold. The thick stone walls, which tour guides are so proud of, had enormous thermal inertia. This meant that they barely had time to warm up during the summer, and with the first autumn cold spells, they began to greedily absorb heat from inside. To heat a 100 square meter hall with 5-meter ceilings required the energy of a small power plant. The open fireplaces we see in movies had an efficiency close to zero, as most of the heat escaped up the chimney. They only warmed the face, leaving the back to freeze, creating a dangerous temperature difference. Window openings, even when covered with oiled paper or horn plates, were the main sources of heat loss. Glass was an insanely expensive and rare material, available only in cathedrals and royal palaces. Most windows were simply holes in the wall through which the wind whistled. Shutters were of little help, as there were always gaps between them and the stone. In winter, these gaps were plugged with rags and straw, plunging the rooms into perpetual darkness. The system of corridors and passageways was designed to confuse the enemy, but it also created ideal conditions for drafts. Air cooled by contact with the icy stones sank down and rushed through the narrow passages. The doors were rough, often poorly fitted, and could not serve as a reliable barrier to air currents. Walking around the castle without a warm cloak and hood was a sure way to catch pneumonia. The floors, often paved with stone slabs or compacted earth, were another enemy of warmth. The straw scattered on the floor served more to collect dirt than to provide insulation. The cold from the ground penetrated unhindered into the rooms on the lower floors, making them practically uninhabitable in winter. Therefore, the bedrooms of the nobility were placed on the upper floors, even though the wind blew more strongly there. The only engineering solution that worked at all was to place the living quarters above the kitchen. Warm air rose, heating the floor of the room located directly above the hearth. These rooms were considered the most prestigious and comfortable in the entire castle. The struggle for the right to occupy a warm room could give rise to real intrigue at court. Ventilation in castles was either excessive due to gaps or completely absent when everything was tightly closed. Smoke from fireplaces and torches often had no way out and accumulated under the ceilings, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Residents were forced to choose between the cold and a constant cough from the smoke. This explains why many medieval people suffered from chronic lung and eye diseases. Water and dampness were constant companions in a stone bag. Condensation accumulated on cold walls, promoting the growth of mold and mildew, which destroyed the health of the inhabitants. The damp cold penetrated the bones much deeper and more painfully than dry frost. Drying clothes or bedding in such conditions was a real challenge. Interestingly, in earlier eras, such as Roman times, there were systems of heated floors called hypocausts. But in the Middle Ages, this technology was lost or forgotten in most regions of Europe. Castle builders took a step back in terms of comfort, sacrificing everything for safety. This was the price they had to pay for living in an era of constant war. We can see that a castle was not a romantic dwelling, but a harsh machine for survival. Every stone in it worked against man when it came to warmth, and only one place defied this stone coldness: the kitchen. Do you think safety is worth such sacrifices and comfort? In the next chapter, you will learn the truth about the heart of the castle, which never stopped beating.
With the chopping.
Want to know a secret that will change your perception of how food was prepared in the past? Medieval castle kitchens had nothing in common with cozy home kitchens where grandma bakes pies. It was a real industrial workshop, a giant factory for converting biomass into calories and heat. The size of the kitchen rooms in large castles could rival modern sports halls. The high arches were black with soot, and the air was saturated with the smells of roasted meat, smoke, and the sweat of dozens of people. In the center of this space were hearths so large that an entire adult bull could be roasted in them. The fire in these giant fireplaces roared around the clock, consuming entire tree trunks at a time. This was not just a bonfire, but a controlled element that required constant attention and respect. The temperature near the hearth was so high that the cooks worked with wet towels on their heads to avoid heat stroke. The walls of the kitchen, unlike the rest of the castle, were always warm, sometimes even hot to the touch. The stone here did not have time to cool down, constantly absorbing the energy of the giant fires. This created a powerful thermal buffer that protected the room from the outside cold. Even in the most severe frosts, it was possible to walk around the kitchen in just a shirt, and sometimes even naked from the waist up. It was the only place in the castle where there was always an unlimited supply of hot water. Huge cauldrons suspended over the fire boiled constantly, providing for the needs not only of the kitchen, but of the entire castle. The steam from the cauldrons increased the humidity, but here it was a blessing, as the warm, humid air heated the space better. The people who worked here had access to the luxury of washing with warm water, which was unavailable even to many nobles. The kitchen was a place where the architecture finally worked to conserve heat rather than lose it. The thick walls here acted as insulation, trapping the heat inside, like in an oven. Small windows, often located high under the ceiling to allow smoke to escape, minimized the influx of cold air. The entire structure was designed to maintain the high temperatures necessary for cooking for hundreds of people. There was a special atmosphere of constant movement and hard physical labor. Dozens of people ran around, chopped, stirred, carried heavy loads, generating additional heat with their bodies. The density of people per square meter here was the highest in the entire castle. This human stove contributed to the overall microclimate of the room. Special niches were often built into the kitchen walls where people could sleep or simply warm themselves. These places were worth their weight in gold, and there was a quiet but fierce struggle among the servants for the right to occupy them. Sleeping in the warmth, lulled by the crackling of logs and the smell of food, was the highest reward after a hard day's work. Interestingly, the kitchen was often built as a separate building or wing so that the entire castle would not burn down in case of fire. But even when separated, it remained the energetic heart of the complex. Heat pipes as we understand them today did not exist, but the kitchen was a kind of boiler room. From here, hot coals were carried in braziers to the rooms of the nobility. It was a place of extreme contrast, the heat of the fire and the cold of the storerooms, the smell of exquisite dishes and the stench of waste. But most importantly, it was a place of life, energy, and warmth. While people in the Great Hall were chattering their teeth from the cold, Life was boiling here in every sense of the word. The kitchen was a state within a state, with its own laws and hierarchy built around the fire. Whoever controlled the fire controlled life in the castle. Like this if you were surprised by the scale and importance of this room in the life of a medieval person. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how much it actually cost to heat a stone fortress? Supplying the castle kitchen with fuel was not a domestic task, but a logistical operation of almost military scale that did not stop for a single day of the year. Feeding the fiery monsters in the hearths required more than just firewood. It required tons of wood every day, a continuous flow comparable to the blood supply of the body. The forests around the castles were disappearing at a catastrophic rate, retreating further and further, and the woodcutters had to go many miles to find wood, risking encounters with wolves, robbers, and severe winter blizzards. Every morning, a line of carts loaded with logs, brushwood, oak logs, and sacks of charcoal stretched to the castle gates. This endless river of fuel disappeared into the insatiable maw of the kitchen fireplaces, which burned from dawn until late at night. An entire army of lumberjacks, charcoal burners, carters, and assistants was required to cut, transport, and process the wood. The castle manager, an expert in survival in conditions of scarcity, had to plan supplies months in advance, especially before winter, when every mistake could spell disaster for the entire garrison. The quality of the wood played a decisive role in the amount of heat and smoke produced. Well-dried oak or beech produced an even, long-lasting flame and dense coals, necessary for roasting huge carcasses and cooking thick soups. Raw, resinous wood, pine, spruce, smoked, shot sparks, filled the rooms with smoke, weakened the heat, and cost the kitchen extra hours of work. The right to the best firewood, like the best food, belonged only to the kitchen and the lord's private quarters. The rest of the castle's inhabitants had to make do with brushwood, wood chips, and what was left over from cutting logs. Charcoal was the fuel of the highest caste, an elite resource of the Middle Ages, the equivalent of high-octane fuel. It burned almost without smoke, gave off an even extremely high heat, and was indispensable for braziers in bedrooms, where smoke could be a deadly enemy. Charcoal was also used for delicate cooking, preparing sauces, baking sweets, and melting incense. Coal production was a separate craft. Charcoal burners lived for weeks in the forest, in tar houses, watching over smoldering piles of wood. Their work was hard, dangerous, and shrouded in secrecy. Bad coal could ruin the work of the entire kitchen. The huge wood piles in the castle courtyard were not just a reserve. They were a symbol of power and wealth. Having large reserves of firewood meant the ability to survive the harsh winter, feed people, and maintain the castle's working rhythm. A shortage of fuel could lead to panic, riots, and desertion faster than a shortage of bread. Cold demoralizes more than fear. A frozen soldier thinks not about service, but about his own survival. Storing firewood was a separate problem. Wet or damp logs turned into a useless mass incapable of burning. Therefore, long sheds with high roofs were built, carefully oriented according to the wind. The wood had to breathe but must be ventilated and dry, but at the same time be protected from rain and snow. Specially appointed people monitored the condition of the wood piles. They literally risked their freedom or their lives for the safety of the fuel. Mold could destroy strategic reserves in a single season, which sometimes meant certain death for the castle. In winter, the roads became deadly dangerous. Snow-covered paths, fragile ice, windbreaks. When supplies were running low, the entire fortress began to fight for survival. Old furniture, broken carts, wooden gates, ladders, boards, and any objects that could burn were used. There are known cases when, during a siege, castle residents burned floor beams, risking the collapse of entire rooms just to get some heat. The cost of firewood consumed a huge part of the budget of any noble house. It was money that literally went up in smoke every day. It was impossible to save fuel in the kitchen. Fire was part of the technological process, but in the rest of the castle, they saved fiercely. Only the most important rooms were heated, and the corridors, halls, and barracks were freezing cold. Even the ashes left over after burning entire forests were not thrown away. They were used to produce lye, the basis for washing, cleaning floors, and making soap. This was an example of forced economy when every bit of a resource was valuable. The wood cycle was practically closed. Otherwise, the castle simply would not have survived. The scale of wood consumption shows how expensive and destructive to nature it was to maintain even one warm room. A medieval castle was a real ecological disaster for the surrounding forests, a giant furnace that devoured natural resources without stopping. What if I show you the other side of the coin? The one that beautiful legends and romantic illustrations don't mention. Life in a medieval kitchen, for all its apparent warmth and comfort, was a real hell for the lungs, eyes, and skin. Huge hearths, designed to cook food for hundreds of people, emitted tons of smoke, soot, and fumes. The ventilation systems of the time, simple openings, unadorned chimneys, and raised skylights, rarely coped with this volcano of combustion products. Thick, acrid smoke hung under the ceiling like a dense leaden mass, slowly sliding down like fog, corroding everything in its path. Everyone who worked near the fire suffered from constant irritation of the mucous membranes. Their eyes were perpetually red and inflamed, as if they had not slept for weeks. Chronic coughing, hoarseness, and husky voices were professional hallmarks of cooks. They truly wept while preparing royal feasts, but not from emotion or the touching stories of minstrels. Their tears were squeezed out by the smoke. Over time, many lost their sharp vision. Some developed corneal ulcers, and their breathing became more difficult with each passing year. Soot settled on literally everything. A thick, greasy, sticky layer covered the walls. Beams, ceiling, huge cauldrons, and small bowls. It saturated their hair, skin, and nails. The kitchen workers looked like miners who had just come out of a coal mine. Black faces, soot stains under their eyes like war paint, and hands that could not be washed with ash, lye, or sand. This blackness was their uniform, their mark of belonging to the world of fire and smoke. The smells in the kitchen were a mixture that modern people would find monstrous. Fried fat, burnt food, the sour smell of unwashed bodies, smoke, soot, rancid oil, wet wool, spices. All this mixed into a thick, heavy aroma that ate into the walls and people. But to the medieval nose, it was the smell of life, warmth, and satiety. In a world where cold could kill faster than a sword, the smell of smoke meant there will be food, the fire is alive, we will survive another day. The cook's clothes were so deeply saturated with the smell of smoke that no amount of washing could get rid of it. Even if such clothes were aired for months, the smell remained, like a shadow. By the smell alone, it was possible to unmistakably identify a person who worked near the fire, even in complete darkness. Kitchen smoke was their invisible, indelible uniform. Soot penetrating the lungs caused chronic bronchitis, inflammation, and diseases for which medieval medicine had neither cures nor explanations. Doctors could only offer herbal infusions that relieved the pain but did not treat the cause. The lungs of a 40-year-old kitchen master often resembled those of an old smoker. Black, clogged with soot, damaged by years of smoke inhalation. In the next chapter, you will learn how meat was roasted, why huge spits were needed for this, and why the process itself heated not only the food, but also the people. Cooking in a medieval kitchen was not just a culinary art, but a complex technological process involving mechanics. The main tool was a huge spit on which animal carcasses were roasted. The rotation of the spit ensured even roasting and heat distribution. Special people stood by the fire, spit boys or men whose sole task was to turn the handle for hours on end. It was monotonous, exhausting work in an area of maximum heat. The heat radiation from the coals was so intense that the workers covered themselves with wooden shields or wet skins. Sometimes ingenious mechanisms were used to rotate the spits. There were counterweight systems and even wheels in which dogs were run. The dog ran inside the wheel, rotating the mechanism that transmitted torque to the spit. This was an example of early automation using a biological engine. The metal structures of the hearth, grates, hooks, stands, were heated red hot. They acted as radiators, continuing to give off heat even when the flames died down a little. The entire hearth area was saturated with infrared radiation. The temperature was controlled not by turning a knob, but by moving the food closer to or further from the fire. This required experience and intuition, an understanding of the physics of heat transfer. The cook was the conductor of a thermal orchestra. The use of large copper and cast iron boilers also contributed to the heating. The water in them had a high heat capacity, cooling slowly and humidifying the air. Steam carried heat throughout the high-ceilinged room. Bread ovens, often located in the same room or in an adjacent room, added heat. Their massive brick vaults heated up to hundreds of degrees and retained heat for days. Bakers worked in conditions similar to a sauna. Understanding the mechanics of kitchen heat gives us the key to understanding survival in the castle. It was a symbiosis of cooking and heating. Food was fuel for people, and the process of cooking it was fuel for the building. Since the kitchen was the only source of real heat, it became necessary to transport this heat to other rooms. This is how portable braziers and hot water bottles appeared. These were metal containers on legs, filled with hot coals. Servants would scoop coals from the kitchen hearth and carry them to their master's bedrooms. The braziers were placed in the middle of the room or next to the bed. They gave off a pleasant, radiant heat, but cooled quickly and required the coals to be replaced. There was a danger of suffocating from such a brazier if the coals were of poor quality. Therefore, only high-quality charcoal that had burned down to the point of no smoke was used. Sometimes fragrant herbs were thrown into the coals to mask the smell of burning. To warm the bed, they used special heaters, closed metal pans with long handles and coals inside. The maid would run such a heater between the sheets, ironing and warming them before her master went to bed. This was a mandatory ritual on winter evenings. Heated stones or bricks wrapped in cloth were also used. They were placed under the blanket at the feet and kept warm for several hours. It was a safe and inexpensive way to stay warm at night. There were even pocket warmers, small metal balls or boxes with smoldering charcoal inside. They were carried in wide sleeves or muffs to warm the hands. This was the prototype of modern chemical warmers. Hot water in jugs also served as a source of heat, but it cooled quickly. Metal flasks with boiling water were rare and expensive. Ceramics cracked from temperature changes, so boiling water had to be handled with care. Heat delivery was a constant job for a whole staff of servants. Running up and down the stairs and corridors with shovels of coal continued throughout the evening. It was manual labor that replaced the heating pipe system. These methods were inefficient, providing only local and temporary warmth. As soon as the coals went out, the cold instantly returned. It was a never-ending battle against entropy, but it was these small pockets of portable heat that made life in the icy castle at least somewhat bearable. They were messengers of the great fire of the kitchen to the remote corners of the fortress. This view of history through the prism of everyday difficulties brings the distant past closer and makes it easier to understand. We begin to appreciate our modern comforts, radiators, and hot water, which we take for granted. Medieval people showed incredible resilience and ingenuity to survive in these stone refrigerators. Their experience is a reminder of how fragile humans are in the face of nature. How would you cope with the cold if you found yourself in a medieval castle? Which of the ways to keep warm did you find the most ingenious or the most terrible? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.